All right,
All right, here we go.
here we are.
Woo-hoo-hoo.
Oh my,
I think that was okay.
the woos.
I thought the woo was fine.
I don't know.
I think I leveled it
You're
out.
pushing it.
Wow.
All right.
Rude.
All right. Well, Dustin, what are we talking about this weekend? It's funny you should ask.
What-
we're talking
What
about?
is happening?
Napoleon. I'm practicing in case I ever have to do this solo.
If you have to do this solo, it's gonna be a very boring podcast. I've listened to our episodes.
I'm going to. Wow, rude.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I am what the people tune in to hear. Okay.
I'm going to have notes from Kyle, and
Okay.
I'm going to read them to myself.
Hey Kyle, how many names am I gonna mispronounce today? I don't know, Dustin. Probably all of them.
Hey, Kyle, I was supposed to talk to you about that before we started recording because I needed some pronunciations, but it's too late now. So we're just going with it.
I'll be fine. It's my job. It's
All
what
right.
I'm paid for.
So today we're talking about
Napoleon.
which one? There's like 5. We learned that.
Yeah, we did when we went to watch the newest Napoleon, released it like 3 weeks ago.
Well, hold on. If you're listening to this in like 2026.
Okay, all right. The 2023 Napoleon with, as Dustin calls him, Joaquin Phoenix,
Walking Phoenix.
and the director from Gladiator, Ridley Scott.
And Alien. The director of Alien. I mean. Okay, anyways, yes, we have really, I'm just going to say, like, I kind of break down the cast sometimes.
Yeah, go for it.
We're going to talk about 2 people because
Okay.
that's 90% of the cast.
Yeah, oh my
in
God,
this movie. Joaquin Phoenix
Mm-hmm.
plays Napoleon Bonaparte,
Yes, he does.
and Vanessa Kirby plays Josephine.
I recognized her from somewhere, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember.
I couldn't remember it either.
and then I looked it up, and I remembered, and now I can't remember again.
So, yeah, so I know, I've seen Hobbs and Shaw. Wouldn't recommend it, but I mean, you
It's,
know,
it's fine. If you
It's
like
whatever.
if you like punching people and blowing things up,
If
it's
you
not
want to
bad.
feel dumber after a movie,
Yeah.
go ahead.
It's just The Rock and Jason Statham being The Rock and Jason Statham for 2 hours.
But yeah, no, I feel like I've seen her in something else. And I don't remember what it is now.
Mm.
Anyways, I thought she did great in this.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how are people feeling about this, Kyle?
Historians have mixed emotions.
And audiences?
They also have mixed emotions.
It's not going well.
It's a mixed bag of a movie. Even when we watched it, we got done and we kind of talked ourselves into really liking it, and then we left and we were like, wait a second,
I don't know
did
if
we
I'd-
really like it?
I don't know if I'd say really liking it. I talked myself into being like, that was good.
That was good.
That was fine.
Yeah.
And the more I thought about it, I was like,
It's-
that was okay.
I'm gonna go out on a limb. For me, it's fine, but part of the reason it's only fine is because it's completely different from what all the trailers imply it to
Mhm.
be. And I think that's irresponsible. Like, I'm not the film guy, but I
Mhm.
think trailers are supposed to tell people what they're getting, not what you think your movie is.
Or it should purposefully misdirect the audience
Sure.
for an effect while you're watching the movie.
Yeah.
One way or the other. I think, and you know, for a lot of the critics for this, I think you could have, you know, sidestepped a lot of hate if you would have just titled it Napoleon and Josephine.
Because it is. And it's not, that part of the movie is good. Like,
I like it.
yeah, I like the dynamic, right? We're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. We haven't even talked about the movie. But the movie, if you haven't watched it yet, it is our duty as responsible citizens to warn you, it is not Napoleon the general. It is not Napoleon the leader of France. It is Napoleon the guy.
The horn dog.
Yes. The kinky, weird-ass guy from France, and his relationship with his first wife.
Right.
Is most of the movie. The other stuff's in there, but most of the movie's that. And it's not bad at all, but know that going in to watch that movie.
Also, I feel like before we get any further, we should say Kyle doesn't believe that you can spoil history, but
It's called Wikipedia. It's
It's
what I use
called-
for half of my research.
I tell you what, Kyle, I didn't know much of nothing about Napoleon, and I feel like after I watched this, I still don't know much of nothing
You might
about
know
Napoleon.
less, as it turns out.
I might actually. I know things incorrectly now.
Yeah.
No. But we are going to talk about the plot of this. It is historical. There's nothing like added in.
Yeah, I think that was the compromise we reached that will spoil the end of Napoleon's story, but not the end of the couple's story, or did I have that backwards?
No, I think that sounds right.
Yeah, because we don't want to spoil the main driving element of the
Right.
story, which is their relationship.
Yeah.
And most people who aren't Dustin have a vague idea that Napoleon is defeated and like cast out of France.
There are a lot of Dustins out there, Kyle. Let me tell you that.
Yeah, but I don't think they have the patience to sit their ADHD asses through this podcast, man.
You know that. Well, I thought you were going to say the movie. Okay, so
Or the movie, for that matter.
I'll be
You
honest.
were only there because there was unlimited popcorn.
Well, I'll be honest, man. I wouldn't have watched this if it wasn't for wanting to do an episode on the podcast. I wouldn't have gone to the theater and watched this. I may have watched it eventually.
Yeah.
And part of that, like you said, with the trailers, man, the trailers just didn't hook me.
Really?
Like at all.
They hooked me a lot, and then I watched the movie, and I'm like, I've been lied to.
Yeah, just I don't know. I'm kind of like, we've seen the historical epic and the battle scenes so many times in so many different movies that if you don't show me something that looks like, oh, I've never seen that before, I
Right.
just don't really care.
Yeah, and it could have been, because it wasn't, it could have been, like we talked about, Napoleon as the commander, which we'll get more into, but Napoleon's legacy is and should be a weirdly effective ruler of France, even though he's a megalomaniac and a jackass. And also an incredibly brilliant battlefield tactician and strategist. Neither of those things really come across in the movie.
I didn't see anything.
Not
like
much.
a
There's like one scene
battle.
that we'll talk about in a minute that kind of implies that he's really good at fighting. But across that,
no, I'm saying like there's nothing like, oh, this is how he is
well, there's
so
nothing
good
like
at
this man is
planning.
brilliant. Like
Yeah.
there's no, this guy is a genius.
I could have thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's dive in just a little bit. First off, no matter what you say, directed by Ridley Scott. When the movie came out, he was 85. He turned 86 on November 30th. 86 freaking years old. I don't care if they just wheeled him to the set and he called action. That's impressive.
You got to respect the grind.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love it. Don't love it. Written by David Starpa. Sorry, David. I don't know anything about you.
Maybe this isn't your deal, man. Maybe you should look into a different day job.
He has 5 writing credits to his name.
Okay.
He wrote The Last Castle, which seems interesting. I've never seen it. It does seem like a cool movie.
Yeah.
The Day the Earth Stood Still from 2008, which is a very forgettable and not very good remake.
Right.
And All the Money in the World, which was from 2017.
Nobody ever saw.
And again, I never saw it.
So that's kind of an odd choice, film guy. You're a well accoladed, aging, just movie out your like yin yang director, and you pick Joe Schmo as your screenwriter, or you accept a project that was written by Joe Schmo.
I don't know which one came first.
I guess it doesn't matter
honesty,
really, because like it's why would you do that?
That strange choice, and for sure, and I think it really shows in this. I think if I don't want to say a younger Ridley Scott, but very very possibly maybe a more motivated and focused Ridley Scott could have kind of narrowed this down and touched up the script. But man, we'll get to it more. But man, this movie just kind of seemed to not go in any direction.
Because with the exception of Aliens and Gladiator, that's what Ridley Scott does. Is he makes B+ movies out of C- material. Like that's kind of his deal. Like he makes movies that you enjoy watching, even though you're watching it and you're like, this is not awesome. Like the writing is not great and the acting is fine, but damn, this movie is cool.
That's
like
really
that's
good.
kind of what he does.
Yeah.
And he did not do that this time, at least in our opinion.
Okay, so I guess like one of it, I guess the idea or like the production for Napoleon really started years ago before COVID.
Yeah, and COVID had a way of wrecking everything it touched.
Yes,
so.
it was during either during the production of or shortly after the production of The Last Duel.
Oh, okay.
And the actress from that, Jodie, Comer.
Yeah,
I don't know how you pronounce her last name. I'm sorry. She was actually cast as Josephine.
Oh.
And then it just kind of fell apart. I don't know if that was due to COVID or what happened, but that's something I read.
Thinking of what I've watched The Last Duel, it's very good. I like it.
I did too. I thought it was good.
That's a really interesting, like thinking of her as Josephine, that's a whole different tone of a movie.
Complete opposite.
I would think.
Yeah.
Like that's, wow.
I wonder what she would have brought differently to the role.
I don't know if it would have been better or worse, but it would not have been the same.
I can't see it. In all honesty, like what I'm going to remember about this movie probably is Vanessa Kirby.
Yeah, I mean, the movie
Josephine.
should be called Josephine and Napoleon. Like, no Napoleon and like the movie's Josephine.
Yeah,
for the most part.
Well, I don't know. I would say it's more about their relationship because there are also big chunks of Josephine's character that I feel like could have been developed better.
Yeah.
And that she could have had a lot. This is going to piss people off. That I think she could have had more screen time.
I agree.
But if you're going to give her more screen time, don't call it Napoleon.
Weirdly, they were both done dirty by the amount of screen time given to the other person.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
we didn't have time to explore Napoleon because we were focused on Josephine. And we
Right.
didn't have time to explore Josephine because we had to keep going back to Napoleon.
And we focused on the relationship, but we built it. We presented this movie as a historical epic about his conquerors.
About Napoleon's conquests.
And it was none of the above.
Yeah.
So, like I said,
Irresponsible might be the best word.
It just seemed like it lacked focus. It lacked direction. They tried to do too much, and they ended up accomplishing nothing.
Yep. With that being said, let's get into it.
Well, that's my review. All right. See y'all next week.
Yeah,
I'm
there
just
you
kidding.
go. Tune out now.
All right. Well, let's get to the plot of this movie. Shall we?
Yes, we shall.
So, where we start? 1793.
A very good year. Almost as old as I am.
Amid the French Revolution, young army officer Napoleon Bonaparte watches Queen Marie watches Kareem
Abdul-Jabbar get beheaded.
Gosh dang it, that's a terrible, hilarious image. All right, Queen Marie Antoinette beheaded via guillotine.
Yes.
Slay
Girl slay.
So the first thing is when I do a little bit of research for these too.
Oh.
No, it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, do you?
I do. And one of the first things I saw was people were like, he wasn't there. He couldn't have been there.
That's correct. He wasn't. He was at Toulon already.
Does it matter?
No, that one I don't.
Who cares?
I have this, my friends and I have this ongoing discussion, my other historian friends, the nerds that went to grad school with me, about like how important the finer historical details are in things. And it kind of depends on the movie, but generally speaking, like, I am okay with warping time and place as long as it doesn't take away from like the historical significance of it. So the significant part of the beginning of the movie is that Napoleon leads the recapture of Toulon, not where he was in an individual like day.
So one of the breakdowns of this movie that I was watching, they were like, there's 6 battles, and I was like, there's 3. I don't know where you got 6 from. And apparently, I guess that technically there's like 6 battles, but they're like 2 shots a piece.
Yeah,
it's
there's
like,
only
no.
It's only 3 battles. That
I count 3.
I guess 4 because the one in Russia, the cavalry charge that he does.
I guess I don't know,
but 3.5. There's 3.5 actual battles.
All right. Well, you're throwing me off now because I put 3, and that's what I put down. So we're gonna say
all right. There's 3. I'm incorrect.
And
There's 3 real
Kyle
battles.
can put in his half later.
It's like Star Wars. There's action at the beginning, action in the middle, action at the end, and you're bored for the rest of it.
So, the Siege of Toulon is our next scene. It's our first battle where we see Napoleon in action.
Right.
He's a nervous mess.
Oh yeah.
He's leading a charge.
Yep.
Here's our first spoiler. Here it comes. That horse.
Oh my god.
Messed up.
Oh no. There's like a 3-pound cannonball gets shot through the middle of his horse's chest.
Bro, that poor horse. Yeah. That's rough.
It was
It's
some good CGI though, man.
It's like it's one of those things where like it's startling, but it's kind of funny.
And it kind of weirdly it kind of makes sense in the moment because he's super nervous, and then when his horse gets blown up, he gets up and he's like cold as steel, like he's fine.
He like puts his hat back on. He's like, all right, here we go.
But I think it's that battle jitters of like, well, I haven't died yet, so okay, you know.
Yeah. Anyway, so Siege of Toulon. So it is. Let you just explain it.
Yeah.
I don't know why
So
I'm
it's a
to
little.
explain it.
One of the irresponsibles we thrown around a lot when I describe this movie. One of the irresponsible starts is that they briefly mentioned that the British Navy has captured the city of Toulon in France and that they need to retake it. What they don't make very clear is that the French Revolution starts a continental war of France versus what's called the First Coalition, which is Austria, Prussia, I believe, and England and maybe Russia, but every other major power in Europe versus France, because they just overthrew this absolute monarchy, and all the other the other kings and queens are worried
Hey,
because
don't do that to
they're
us.
like, don't do that to us.
We don't like that.
So they invade France, France at this time has a very big population, a very big army, even with the world going to hell in a handbasket. So they don't get super duper far, but they do take some cities. And the British have this massive navy, so a port city's pretty low hanging fruit for them.
So I guess back up just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
Why was the French Revolution happening? We don't have to go into like major detail,
Right,
but just
right.
like that's not even touched on.
Sure. So the French Revolution is really sudden because Louis the 16th is the king during the French Revolution. 2 kings before him is like the height of French power in Europe. So it's a very fast, within 100 years sort of turnaround.
Okay.
Long story short, the French go through this 50-year period of just losing every major war they're in. They lose a lot of little colonial wars in the early 1700s. They lose, we call it the French and Indian War. They call it the 7 Years' War. The Last of the Mohicans War, if you've seen that movie. They lose that one to the British and lose like all of their territory in North America and a lot of it in the Caribbean. Then they win through proxy the American Revolution, which actually was a global war because we allied with Spain and France against Britain.
Huh.
They win that. They're pretty integral to it, but the British, I learned this in a throwaway American Revolution class last semester of grad school, so thank you, MSU. The British at the very end of the war capture the French fleet that helps at the Battle of Yorktown, cuts them in half, and burns half of it to the waterline.
Wow.
So France leaves the American Revolution with limited territorial gains, massive debt, and no navy, even though they were on the winning side.
Right.
And the U.S. can't pay them because they're bankrupt, because they're a new...
Well, we just started.
So really, it was Louis XVI's pissing contest against Britain.
Nice.
France is always looking for a reason to hurt Britain. They do, but they actually weirdly get hurt worse, arguably, than Britain does. Because Britain loses 13 colonies, but they still have their navy, they still have their economy. It is what it is. Fast forward to the 1780s, and there's this really weird winter in Europe where for like 5 years straight or 3 years straight, winter is brutal and the harvests are bad. France is already in an economic downturn. Boats are expensive. They just are. Even today, having a big navy is a really big freaking deal.
Can't even buy a fishing boat, dude.
I know. Yeah, exactly. So imagine a 100-foot tall fishing boat with 50 cannons in it, man. It's crazy. And the people are starving to death, and King Louis XVI is not, he's not as bad of a king as people want to paint him out, but he's not a good king. He's not a strong king. He doesn't have a lot of forced personality. And his wife, Marie Antoinette, is originally Maria Antonia from Austria.
Right.
Rumor circulates that she's robbing the French treasury. I don't think she was. I'm like 90% sure that we've proven that that's just not true. No more so than any other royal pillages.
Yeah.
The French, but the royal family in France is living like times are good when they're not. It's kind of the message. People get fed up with it. The Americans just overthrew the British. Democracy's kind of on the rise. They think they're going to do the same thing. And the French Revolution starts.
Okay. So this is their attempt to establish democracy in their own way.
By the time Napoleon starts, the rebels win pretty quickly. But they leave the king and the queen alive for a minute. Until rumor leaks out that Louis has called his allies in Europe to attack the country and reinstate him as monarch.
Okay.
Again, I don't know how true that is or isn't, but that one's a little more plausible. Like, of course, a dethroned king would want to escape. He and his family flee after the royal palace is charged by the revolutionaries. They almost make it out of the country. They get captured. They get dragged back.
Gotcha.
Louis is executed in, I think, 1791 because he's the king, and queens, for the most part, don't have any real power. They're just the consort of the king. And then a way more like radical faction takes over the revolution than had done it before. They're looking for scapegoats, and we have this Queen of France sitting in prison for 2 years, perfectly ready to get her head chopped off. And that's where Napoleon starts.
The guillotine was ready.
Yep.
All right. Well, after that, after the siege of Toulon, the reign of terror, after Maximilian, I just said
he's just
these.
Robespierre. Like,
Gosh,
you don't have to
dang
use
it.
his first name. It's just Robespierre.
I just pronounced these off the podcast.
Maximilian
Perfectly
Robespierre.
fine. Robespierre.
There you go.
All right. He's executed, ending the reign of terror.
Right.
Okay. French leaders are attempting to reestablish this new government, trying to get stability, and then Napoleon meets Josephine.
Yeah,
That's
basically.
what happens in the movie.
After he takes Toulon, Which is like we talked about this briefly, but it's a bit like that's one of the things that does whatever
It do show.
it do show that he is pretty savvy in tactics because he melts down a bunch of old useless cannon to make mortars
Yeah.
and sneaks up on the fort and then uses the guns of the fort to decimate the British Navy
Right.
with an artillery shell that if he didn't create, he's the first person to use it. It's kind of the implication in the movie.
Okay, so and that was supposed to be they were it was a siege or
so it's a siege of a captured city.
What's the word I'm looking for? Where they blocked off
blockade. Yeah,
blocked. Gosh dang it! It was literally in the name.
Yeah, it's Toulon's a really important port city.
Yeah,
money and supplies come through port cities, especially in the age of exploration and the age of colonialism, which is this is the tail end of that. And yeah, so the city's taken by the British. The French want it back. They send Napoleon. He takes it in dramatic, awesome fashion.
Yeah,
because that battle scene objectively is really cool.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then this is when Napoleon meets Josephine.
Yes.
They get married.
Yes.
That's like probably 30
Takes
minutes.
So long for that to happen.
That's really we just kind of see the dynamic of their relationship.
Yep.
And I like I kind of said earlier, if you titled it Napoleon and Josephine or Josephine and Napoleon, I would be okay with.
I'd be way more okay with it. Like okay, because it is fascinating. Like
yeah. The movie had me up to about this point.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of cut away a couple times to to the Reign of Terror ending, and then here in a little bit where him and his colleagues overthrow the government.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm like, hey, you didn't really explain that.
Yeah,
I'm kind of confused. I mean, if you know the history of it, I'm sure it made more sense. But to me, and I hopefully would say most people watching this movie, I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, so we have this really brief segue where Napoleon goes to Egypt, which did happen.
Oh yeah, and then he comes back because Josephine is not being faithful.
Right. Which in real life is not why he came back.
Okay. This is what I'm saying about it doesn't explain why she did it. It doesn't even give any characterization to who she did it with. It is more or less implied that Napoleon may not be the greatest lover. So it kind of implies that he's not really fulfilling.
He's not real. He's not great in the bedroom. It's funny because in the movie, his fake reason for coming back is the real reason that it happened historically.
Okay.
So historically, Josephine did have a lover. That much we know. Napoleon did find out about it. He dealt with it in his own way. But not in that time period yet because it's so new that there's no. But he comes back because he gets defeated a couple times in Egypt because his army lacks supplies.
Mm-hmm.
And he thinks to himself, why is my army lacking in supplies? I'm really the only offensive happening right now. And this is very important because Egypt is a very wealthy British colony, and Britain is the bane of our existence with their giant-ass navy and their highly trained army. What's going on? And the more he negotiates with the British and the more he negotiates with his own ambassadors, the more he's realizing that France is just falling apart at the seams, that the provisional government in charge is not doing its job. He, being the super narcissistic man that he is like, this is my chance. France needs me specifically. And he hops his happy butt on a boat, goes back to France, and then does pretty much what he does in the movie, which is he and two other guys from the ruling council stage a coup.
Yeah.
In their defense, this is one of those weird moments in history where it looks like they're bad guys who are kind of sort of doing a good thing because France is just falling apart at the seams. And these three do, for a longer than a second, bring stability to France. So, jury's out on whether they had good intentions or not. But they do stage a coup, and they do manage to secure, French hegemony and kind of revitalize the country.
And they established the first consul?
Yeah, there's three consuls, and that comes from a Roman thing where in Rome it's called the triumvirate, but Julius Caesar started as one of three.
Okay.
Octavian, Emperor Augustus, started as one of three. So it's a legacy of this happens sometimes in history where to avoid giving power to one guy, you give it to a handful.
See, and there was comparisons made of him to Caesar, but I was confused because then, like, the next scene, he's crowned emperor. And I was like, wait, where did the other two guys go?
So he gets himself elected as first consul.
Oh, okay.
So that scene where they're taking power and he gets chased out of the royal hall and has to march back in with his army, I will double check to see if that actually happened, but it's a coup.
There was a funny line in that where they have their guns aimed at everybody in the building.
And he goes, shall we put it to a vote?
Shall we put it to a vote?
And he's so calm about it, too, after just almost being murdered by a mob.
Right. Moving on to the next battle.
Austerlitz is Austria and Russia. It's part of this thing called the War of the Third Coalition. Basically, what happens is the First Coalition is the immediate response to the French Revolution, where Napoleon takes Toulon and becomes the leader of the army, drives the invaders out of France. French win. War of the Second Coalition is when he's in Egypt and he's getting beat because of lack of supplies. He comes back, restabilizes it, kind of a status quo at film. The War of the Third Coalition, basically this time it's Britain.
Okay.
So Britain does not like that Napoleon is building a big navy. Britain does not like that Napoleon has his eyes on the Caribbean because they kicked the French out of there a long time ago. But now that they don't have the 13 colonies, they're worried that he's going to get another foothold because they don't control the entire Western Hemisphere anymore. So they go to the rest of Europe and they're like, hey, we don't like this guy. And they go, well, we don't either, but he's kicked our ass the other times. And Britain goes, no, it's cool. We got it this time. So it's them and Russia, and then Austria kind of schlumps in because they've been beaten by Napoleon twice in the last 10 years. And they go, yeah, okay, we can take him. There's 3 of us. We got this.
Right.
Needless to say, they do not got this.
Yeah.
Because Napoleon is Napoleon. And the Battle of Austerlitz is the final battle of the Third Coalition.
The Battle of Austerlitz in the film is the second major battle. That's like actually like shown more than just very briefly. This is where, if you've seen the trailer or if you've seen the movie, then you understand that this is where they start marching over what they don't know is a frozen lake.
Yeah. I think it is interesting before we get into this battle.
Yeah.
This is the one part of the movie where Napoleon's the rational one. Because and this did happen in history, peace has been restored. At the moment, he's really only invading Haiti, which is a French island. Now, it's a French island with a bunch of slave plantations on it, and the slaves revolt and claim it as their island. So he's not the good guy in that, but he's only dealing with internal French affairs right now. He's not attacking anybody. He's not invading anybody. But Britain is worried that he's going to become too powerful and start an overseas empire. So they rally everybody against him. And in the movie, that is something I liked, is they portray him as being like, what is wrong with all of you? Like, we have peace. I'm not threatening anybody.
Right.
Why are you starting a war that I am going to win? So again, it's that narcissistic megalomaniac thing. But at this point, the proof is in the pudding. He's won 2 wars against coalitions of 3 or more countries.
Yeah.
So what are you doing poking the bear is kind of the message there.
Yeah. And this is something that kind of they go back and forth. Really, I feel like it's never, the movie never pits a side on if Napoleon is a good guy or a bad guy.
Which is fair because he's a guy who's hard. I think he was a bad person based off of what I've read. Whether or not I can classify him as like a Mao Zedong or a Hitler or a Genghis Khan, like somebody who is detrimental to history or like can be painted as the bad guy. Like he was always the aggressor and was always in the wrong. I don't know if we can do that because again, the War of the Third Coalition isn't him. Now he might have started it eventually, but like he doesn't start it. The British start it. So I don't know.
And
he's no more tyrannical or in power than any other European monarch. He's just the one who wins.
That's what I'm saying. He just kind of seems to be, he's the leader of France and he's fighting these wars and he happened to win for a while. And that's kind of seemed to be like the only point that the movie
makes. Which is kind of actually embodied in the really cool but very confusing Battle of Austerlitz scene. Go ahead. You describe what you saw because I know the history, so I want to hear like your take on it.
So essentially, he sets up this not decoy camp, but kind of like he has a lot of his men down on a lower level, and they Austria and Russia, correct?
Yes.
Just march their soldiers right towards them, and then he flanks them from higher ground, and he lets loose this artillery, and as they're trying to retreat, he shoots off cannons over this lake that's frozen, and a lot of the men end up falling into the lake. That's broken apart by the cannonballs and the explosions taking place. This is definitely Napoleon at his most competent and confident
Yes.
in the film. And I think this is the closest we get to what people wanted to see of the tactician and the mind of Napoleon during his battles. It's possible. From this movie, it might be my favorite scene.
It's good. And honestly, the battle is not perfect in terms of the recreation. It's really not bad. The main thing that's missing is that it's a little generous to Napoleon. Like, it doesn't, from what I understand, it wasn't a preconceived ambush. It was a preconceived, like, heavyweight knockout fight. But Napoleon, being the brilliant tactician that he is, he had some men in reserve. He pulls some other men out of the line before the battle even starts, because what happens is that he tempts the Russian army in, because Austria has almost fallen to Napoleon at this point. This is like the last gasp of the Austrian army. So there's a lot of Russians with them. The Russians attack him and pull their men off of the high ground. When he sees that, he sends his men to the high ground. So actually, it's an even more desperate fight than you see in the movie, because in the movie, the men that he uses as a decoy are fighting like crazy bastards to stay alive long enough for him to help them. In real life, it's even worse, because in real life, he's not already there. His men aren't already on the heights. He is marching them up the other side of the mountain. So his center is just mauling with the Russians and the Austrians.
Yeah.
When he finally gets his men up, he sends them down, and this does happen exactly like in the movie, is he sends this massive amount of men down the slope, and the sun burns the fog off right as they start to hit the battlefield, and the Russians look, and suddenly there's tens of thousands of French soldiers on their flank.
Okay, this is when we have kind of a controversial little piece of this. Trenches.
I think the problem with it is that it would be more earthworks than trenches. And that's I don't have a huge problem with trenches appearing before the American Civil War, because credit where credit is due, General Longstreet of the Confederacy kind of invented trench warfare. But like, breastworks and earthworks and trenches are almost the same thing. It's just, are you hiding behind a man-built wall of rubble, or are you hiding behind a man-dug wall of rubble? Like, it gets the same concept across.
When I was watching a little bit behind the scenes stuff, this is another one. If you remember back to Gladiator, Ridley Scott was like, "You weren't there. How do you know?"
Right. And usually I'm okay with that, because the farther back the movie takes place, the more I'm like, sure, man. Okay. Yeah, we don't know. We know everything about the Napoleonic Wars, because everybody who commanded the men were literate, and most of them survived it, and they all wrote about it, because even in the moment they knew that historically this is going to be an incredibly important thing.
This is when so we're going to kind of speed through the next, I don't know, setting up the third act of this film.
Oh, should we talk about the Ice Lake controversy?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I thought we were, go ahead.
No, you're good. So 2 controversies in this battle. Ironically, the tactics aren't one of them, because it's pretty close, like I said. But trenches are one. The big one is that at the end of the battle, as the Russians and the Austrians are retreating, Napoleon fires cannon shots into the frozen lake to kill as many men as possible. This is a controversy because historians themselves cannot agree on whether this actually happened. And the reason we can't agree is because Napoleon claims that it happened just like in the movie. Weirdly, so did the guy who was the Tsar of Russia. But when Napoleon dredged the lake, records show that it was only 2 men dead and 100 and something horses. I'm of the opinion, based off of that I honestly think that Ridley Scott kind of got it right on accident. And the reason I say that is, why would the Russian Tsar admit to losing 1,000 or 2,000 men in a frozen lake if he didn't? Like, why would he? And it was after the battle, and it was after the wars were over. Why would he do that to his enemy?
Speaking of which, there's a small scene where it looks like a French rebellion is happening again, and he just open fires cannons
Yeah, that did
at
happen.
a mob of people.
Yeah.
And there's a horrible shot of most of these people are dead,
Yeah.
right? There's a horrible shot of a woman, like a middle-aged woman, who is now missing a leg,
Yeah.
who's like just kind of crawling around. And I was like, holy crap.
Yeah, and that is just taken. So there's a royalist insurrection before Napoleon takes power against the Reign of Terror, or what's left of the Reign of Terror. He takes the job to be the defender of the government, and he does exactly that. He drags cannons from 40 miles away. He puts them in front of the governing building, and he just canister shots, which is, for those of you not in the know, canister shot is basically stuffing a giant oversized shotgun shell into a cannon and firing it at point blank range at people.
That's what whenever I saw it, because they're like, it's not like one big cannonball. It's smaller little, cannonballs. It's like smaller little cannonballs that come out, and it's a bunch of them.
It's
just like a shotgun.
It's shrapnel shot. Yeah. It's you had 40 giant shotguns just unloaded to a crowd. He kills 300 people in that within a couple minutes, and the royalist insurrection just dissolves.
It is done. Okay. Like I said, this next part we're gonna kind of
we're gonna get through it
because it's a lot about the relationship, and if if you're interested in that, watch the movie because it does a good job. Okay, this is the part where I was like, what the heck did I just watch? Because in like 15 minutes, okay, we go from this. He goes back to his love story. Okay, now we're back onto the conquest. Russia, the Tsar of Russia, has basically gone back on his truce. He invades Russia. He gets all the way to Moscow. We don't see like any fighting. He gets to Moscow. Moscow is on fire. And he says, what a coward. He would rather burn a city than face me. And then he marches back. And in the march back, he loses 500,000 men to just it being cold.
Yeah, okay. So invading Russia is always a bad idea. Invading Russia with any chance that you're going to be in Russia in winter, doubly bad idea. Like historically, the only people who've done that are the Mongols. Because they had horses, and they're the Mongols. They are literally the historical exception. Watch the John Green documentary about it on YouTube, the little crash course history on the Mongols. They are the exception. Yeah, at this point, what they did not mention at all, really, Napoleon owns Europe by the time he invades. I mean, owns it. He nominally, Austria and Prussia and all these other minor states have their own borders, but he is in charge. He is Emperor of France, and France is now from Spain to the western border of Poland.
So he's conquered most of Europe.
Yeah.
And
Russia stands alone.
He is sitting atop that mountain, and he takes, I don't know how many men, into Russia.
650,000.
Okay, so he loses most of them.
Oh, he loses almost all of them. So the thing about it is he's trying to force Russia. The circumstances are right in the movie. They're just poorly executed, and people don't know what it is.
It's so confusing.
He is still... Napoleon is always at war with Great Britain. Like, that's something... People need to know that going into the movie. There's 4 years where Napoleon's not actively at war with Great Britain. He's always at war with Britain. He can never take the island because the British Navy is just too good. As a rebuttal... in 1810, 1811, 1812, he imposes a continental-wide blockade on Britain so that they can't make any money, get any supplies, because they're a freaking island.
Right.
How effective that would be with the British Empire, I don't know. I don't study this period of history very often because lots of people do. But Russia doesn't play ball. Okay. Russia is still not scared of Napoleon because Russia's massive. And they're like, whatever, man. Come at me. You've never fought me in my turf, Like, I've always invaded you, and you've beat us because we're allied with incapable people. So Napoleon, in full and utter belief of his own cult of personality at this point, and thinking that he is unbeatable by any human alive, builds a massive army by this standard, somewhere between 450,000 to 685,000 people. To put it into perspective, the Battle of Austerlitz is huge, and there's only 180,000 people in the whole battle.
On both sides?
Yeah, combined.
Wow.
So he builds a coalition army of his own that is 4 times the size to 5 times the size of the battles he has fought between him and other sovereign nations.
And then he marches them into Russia in wintertime. Well, I
he
guess
doesn't
when he,
mean to.
when he marches them in, it's not wintertime.
What he thinks he's going to do is he's going to like get the rat out of his hole. He's just going to go take Russia. He's like,
Yeah.
you will now bend the knee. Like,
Yeah.
you're mine. I'm done messing with you. You've betrayed me 4 or 5 times, which they do. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, and he invades with this giant army, but the Russians will not stand and fight him because Russia is massive. And at this point, Russia's even bigger than it is now. Russia has all the Baltic states, half of the Balkans, and all of Poland and like Hungary.
Mhm.
Well, not Hungary, but all of Poland, all of Belarus. They extend really far into continental Europe. So he has to conquer like thousands of miles or hundreds of miles before he even gets to anything important in Russia.
Gotcha.
The Russians won't fight. They won't fight, which they do show in the movie. Like they bob and weave. They take pot shots at him. He finally forces a standing fight at the Battle of Borodino, which he wins, but it's part of his massive army and a massive Russian army that hammer each other for like an entire day until he forces them off the field.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing about invading somebody in their own turf. Unless you destroy their army, every time they retreat, they just get closer to their own stuff.
Right.
And you get farther away. Yeah, and so he finally gets to Moscow. So he Borodino is a Russian loss. They lose.
Yeah.
They flee the field. He has hundreds of thousands of men left. He's like, well, that freaking sucked, but I have this giant army on my back. It doesn't matter. Another thing the movie does a little poorly. Napoleon's invasion of Russia he's not personally with every single one of his men.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's an invasion. They spread out. So there's different commanders. They all kind of converge on Moscow, from what I understand. Nobody's there.
Yeah, when he did set Moscow.
Yeah,
aflame.
he didn't. The Russians did.
Well, no, sorry, that's the one I said. I meant the Tsar.
Yeah, the Tsar did. So
Okay.
the Russians employ, when they realize they can't beat Napoleon face to face, they do this thing called scorched earth, which they also do to the Nazis in World War II. Fun fact.
Oh.
You burn everything of value,
Yeah.
so that they can't have it. You take it with you. What you can't take with you, you burn. You spike your cannons. You destroy your muskets. You burn your crops. Everything that you don't need to survive as a people, you don't let the enemy have.
Okay.
So they take Moscow, which is this giant, empty city,
Right.
with nothing in it, no supplies, no people, no craftsmen, no blacksmiths for your horse's shoes, no guys to fix your guns, no doctors to help your sick guys, no food to eat, no blankets, nothing. And then the Russians set it on fire because they would rather burn their greatest city to the ground than let Napoleon have it.
So essentially, he was banking on the supplies that he would get from his conquest.
Yeah, because
and he didn't get
it's
any.
a city of hundreds of thousands of people. He's
Yeah.
assuming he's going to take it. He's going to make the Tsar bend the knee, and he'll replenish. Or if he can't do that, at the very least, if the Tsar flees, it's a city of hundreds of thousands of people. He'll just take the supplies he needs. He'll gut the city, and he'll move on.
Very important factor that was not mentioned at all.
Not at all. No.
Okay, and then we get like 2 shots of them in the cold, and it looks like they're having to kill horses for food.
Yeah.
And then he comes back and he's being exiled. And it's like, wait, what?
Yep. So
I'm like, hold on. What just happened? Because he was 15 minutes ago in the movie, he was emperor, untouchable. Now he's being exiled. He's exiled. I know I'm kind of speed running this, but
No,
essentially this is where I really feel like the movie failed to deliver. He's exiled. He's on the island for a few minutes, and he's like, "Nah, I'm going back."
Yeah.
He comes back, and now he's done an army, and we're like, "Okay, time for Waterloo."
Yeah, that's irresponsible. So
What the heck happened? I was so
lost.
lost.
It was super confusing. Yeah.
Who had the power to exile him? I don't understand any of it.
That's the thing. He's not okay, he is, but he's not. He's not exiled by the French government just because he fails in Russia. He's exiled because they just beat the crap out of him in Russia, and Russia and Britain and Austria and Prussia come at him again in the War of the Fifth Coalition and beat him down and threaten the new French. They basically are like, we will take France if you don't get this asshole out of here.
Not mentioned.
I know. Yeah.
Okay.
So he gets defeated at Leipzig. He gets exiled to
Elba?
Elba.
Elba?
Yeah, Alba. It's
no.
a little French colony.
Yeah.
He gets because there is this thing that we still do now, but we really used to do then. Officers are treated a certain way.
Right.
And leaders of countries are treated a certain way.
Right.
And we're not the French rebels. We're not going to execute them like a dog in the street. We're going to let him live his life
life on a private
as a
island.
governor of an island, thinking, of course, that this guy doesn't like fighting. Like, they make the mistake of thinking Napoleon's a normal freaking person who was just trying to be an aggressive leader, and if we shove him away, he'll take the L and he'll live his life in relative peace and harmony. He doesn't do that. He comes back and he rallies the French behind him with his own cult of personality, which is something we miss. He literally
he does it to like one group of soldiers.
Yeah, that happened, but from what I understand, it's a way bigger.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He does it to one group of soldiers, and then he's like, "All right, the French army's mine again." I'm like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, wait, what? Yeah, he comes back with 700 men. The entire 5th regiment. A regiment is 1,000 or more people.
Right.
So that scene really did him dirty. It looked like it was like 50 guys.
It was.
The 5th regiment comes out to intercept him, and he literally walks out, looks at them, and says, "Here I am. Kill your emperor if you wish." And they respond with, "Long live the emperor," which is more or less what happened in the movie. Just way bigger, like 1,000, 2,000 guys. Right. He does that. He marches towards Paris, and French soldiers just start coming to him. Because before Napoleon, France doesn't know a whole lot but defeat.
Right.
During Napoleon, they're top dog. So all the soldiers, all the officers are like, "The man is back. Here we go.
Here we go.
Let's do this." And immediately the British and the Prussians and the Russians and the Austrians are like, "Oh, hell no. We're not again.
Got to put it down.
No more." And so the British assemble, as we see in the movie, this massive army of allied guys, all under the general command of this guy, Duke of Wellington.
Yeah.
And they meet Napoleon with a large Prussian and British army at Waterloo.
Yeah.
Where he loses.
Yeah, Waterloo was fine. It was confusing. It was like, it almost was like the movie was trying to say that Napoleon lost because of the rain.
They really did the Battle of Waterloo dirty. So let's talk about what happens in the movie. Because we've done a good job of like going back and forth. So let's talk about the movie version.
Okay, in the movie version, Napoleon's like, "No, we're holding off." And who is the army that's coming to back up the British?
Yeah, it's the Prussians.
That's the Prussians. Okay.
Yes.
So the Prussians are on the way.
Right.
They're, I don't remember what they said, 50 miles out.
15,
like
I think, and then
Okay, so they're a ways away. He's got a few hours. It's raining. He can't take the artillery through the rain. It'll get stuck in the mud, and so he's waiting, holding off on doing anything. And essentially the Prussians get too close. He's like, "Okay, I have to go now." He attacks just like straight on. There's nothing special about his attack. It's just like a straight on attack. He has the artillery. He has his men kind of charge, and it doesn't work. The British break off into these squares as the cavalry of the French, run in. There's a little scene here to where like the French, I don't want to say like the reinforcements, because I don't think they're reinforcements, but they're like the second line of attack.
Yeah.
The French are on horses, and then like the British have the same exact thing. So it's showing like they're matched, and he's beat because the Duke of Wellington has a better tactic. He has a better strategy here.
Well, he's just willing to beat him at his own game. He's like, "I don't have to outthink you. I just have to trap you into doing what you always do."
Well, not just that. I just have to wait you out.
Yep.
Because I have reinforcements coming and you don't.
Yep.
And so it's like, okay, so Napoleon, I feel like, okay, so like I said, we have three, in my opinion, we have three major battle scenes that are actually shown throughout the film, that we get kind of this progression and at this point regression of Napoleon. You have the rise. You have him nervous in the first one. He's confident. He's nervous at the siege of Toulon.
Right.
You have he's confident at Austerlitz, and now you have he's overconfident at Waterloo.
Right.
He thinks that everything he touches is gold. He does a basic attack, and it doesn't work.
So really, yeah, and it's weird because it doesn't even seem like it's all that close. Like, you feel like the French are going to lose even before the Prussians
He gets his ass kicked, man.
He does. It's fine. I thought it was cool. Like, the practical effects and everything are cool. So in reality, the Battle of Waterloo, I don't know if it was raining, but I haven't found anything that stated that was significant. Nobody knows when it starts. Somewhere around 10 a.m., Napoleon's forces open fire for some godforsaken reason on this house that the British have occupied that's kind of in the fringe of the battlefield. The British are on the high ground, and Wellington, knowing that he can't outthink Napoleon, or maybe even outfight Napoleon, decides to outstubborn Napoleon. And he fortifies some men in this big walled manor with these really thick walls. And that becomes the fight within the fight. So in Gettysburg, there's this battle within the Battle of Gettysburg on the second day called the Battle of Little Round Top, where the Union win a decisive victory in that area of the battle against the Confederates, and it turns the tide. Same thing in this place called Hougoumont. The British win the mini Battle of Hougoumont. They defend this manor all day. Napoleon, desperate to take it for reasons unknown, just because it's a thorn in his side and he's Napoleon, sends in more troops than he should have.
Right.
And it never falls. The British hold it for the entire battle.
Is it a house?
It's like this walled like manor kind of idea. It has.
That was not in the movie at all.
No, it wasn't, which was crazy because it's a huge part of the Battle of Waterloo.
Huh.
Yeah. Anyway, so that happens. As that's going on, Napoleon's grand battery, his massive cannon, start firing. He has 80 guns, which is ungodly. This is another thing they barely touched on. Napoleon's like widely regarded as a master of modern artillery. Like he's brilliant at it. His artillery placement, his usage of it is why he wins so often.
He does say that about himself, but it's not really shown very much in the movie. Maybe a little bit in Austerlitz, but
yeah,
that's it. So
the Battle of Waterloo, the massive artillery barrage happens, but they're so far away. It causes casualties, but it doesn't force any real decisions. The British fire back. It's this whole, it's how battles happen. You shoot each other with your cannons until somebody decides to flinch. Napoleon flinches. He marches his men at the British. And this is where the lack of awareness from Ridley Scott, or the lack of caring, does the movie injustice. Because in some ways, the British and the French armies are the perfect opponents, because they have fought each other in Spain for 3 years. Never mentioned in the movie. The Peninsular Campaign is wildly important. It's part of the reason Napoleon falls, because the British help the Spanish rebels against the French win. And the Duke of Wellington makes his name constantly defeating and outwitting the French in the Peninsular War, is what it's called, because it's the Iberian Peninsula. So he, with his battle-hardened army and his know-how of how the French fight, comes to Waterloo. And the French, under Napoleon, would attack in these crazy, overpowering columns of men. They're mobile. They're cool. The issue is, it's musket warfare. You can't bring a whole lot of guns to bear all at the same time.
Right.
So they would advance, and then they would spread out and fire. But it's harder to pin artillery on a column.
Right.
That's fine. The British fixed that problem by doing ranked firing, and they will put 3 or 4 or 5 ranks of guys and just unleash unholy hell into this column.
Right.
So it's a stalemate. They kind of go back and forth like that. Napoleon's realizing there's not enough oomph in his first infantry attack. So he kind of relocates, and then here come the British cavalry. They wait, and then right as they're locked together, the British cavalry come. And they don't fully manage to turn the tide, but it's just a melee at this point. There's British cavalry, there's British men, there's French men, there's this giant manor off to the periphery of the battle that's just sucking thousands of guys into it. They're left and right. The French cavalry come, and Wellington unveils his unholy surprise, which is these giant cavalry squares, is what they're called. The French cavalry had earned a reputation of being the crux of every Napoleonic victory. It's his artillery, his cavalry, and the morale of his men.
Yeah.
His men will fight till they die. His cannons are always good and always where he needs them, and his cavalry always attack at the best moment. You see it in Borodino, in the brief Russian battle where he leads the cavalry charge. That's what does it, is he waits until they're engaged and he breaks their lines. Cavalry. He tries that again, and Wellington's men make these giant regimental, large, like thousands of guys, squares.
Right.
The reason you make a square is, as we see in the movie, it breaks the momentum of the cavalry and you can still fire.
It reminded me of like how they would circle the wagons, in like the days of moving west through the United States.
Circle the wagons,
like the skirmishes between the natives and the I don't know what you call them.
Yeah.
Not pilgrims.
Oh, the pioneers.
Pioneers, thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot like it's kind of similar to circling the wagons. And the thing about cavalry attacks is that they kill people, but really they just scare the shit out of guys. Because you've got 1,000, 2,000 horses just running dead at you. If you're in a square, if I'm shoulder to shoulder and I'm in a bayonet line, I'm way less scared of that horse.
Right.
because there's people to my back, there's people to my side. I'm braced. Screw you. Come at me, Frenchie, you know?
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of coordination between Napoleon's artillery and his cavalry, and the cavalry attack fails. Here comes wave number 2 of the French infantry. They just hammer each other back and forth, and Napoleon can't win, and Wellington won't lose, and they fight, and then here comes 120,000 Prussians over the hill.
Game over.
Game over.
Yeah.
And Wellington, in his memoirs, called it the closest thing you had ever seen. So he, like, even in the moment, it doesn't look like it does in the movie. Like, it's not almost a British victory and then the Prussians just met it. I mean, it is a back and forth, like, Sonny Liston versus Muhammad Ali the first time, not the time he knocks him out in one shot. It's the massive, like, heavyweight brawl, and nobody can win.
Right.
And then here comes the ref with a chair just out of left field.
Yeah. No, it definitely doesn't look like that in the movie. It looks like Napoleon's losing the entire time.
And then in real life, Wellington thinks he's going to lose.
Yeah.
Because he's outnumbered by like 15,000 guys. And Napoleon's Napoleon. At the second, slowly but surely, the second French infantry attack starts to roll up his men, and he's out of guys. He has nobody left. Nobody does. It's all committed. The French have some more numbers. It's unfortunate that the British cavalry squares happen, but it's fine. We got them. They're on the ropes.
Yeah.
We can deliver the punch, and then the Prussians get there.
All right, so this is the end of Napoleon's power.
Yep.
I don't really think it's a spoiler, but there's not a lot to talk about there. Let's just skip over. Let's just talk about what we think. What did you think?
I thought it's fine. I didn't think it's great. I didn't think it's bad. I think it's fine. Historically, I think it's not more like fictional than I thought it would be, because I've seen Ridley Scott movies. He didn't make the same choices he normally makes. Usually the story's a little fictionalized, but the world is pretty concrete. He messed up both in this one, and that's hard to sell. And again, the closer you get, the more people, even who don't really know, you can sense it. You're like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why is this happening the way it is? So, I don't know. You want to just me to give a rating, or what do you?
I want to say for this, man, this was a $200 million movie,
and that's all you got.
And
you know what I mean?
It looks phenomenal.
Oh yeah,
the set design looks phenomenal. It looks like a lot of practical effects. It looks like some very large scenes. You know, something that only millions and millions of dollars can put together with all these extras, the horses, the choreography.
Right.
And it's like, man, I can't just say it's just the story, because it's not just the story. It seems, I've said this before, it seems directionless.
It does. I read a good critique that the more I look at what we know of Napoleon and like who he was, the more I think is right. It was written like a British guy with a bone to pick against the French wrote Napoleon.
There was nothing, it's not that there was nothing redeemable about him. There was nothing to him.
No, he's a narcissistic, egotistical, crazy guy.
I don't feel like this wasn't a good character development. This wasn't a good snapshot of, I don't feel like I know him as a person.
He's the same man when he stands in the square and watches the queen get decapitated as he is creepily watching young girls sword fight right before he dies in the final scene.
And the 3 battle scenes, I feel like, are the only character arc that we get. Is he's nervous, he's confident, he's overconfident.
And it's not even his character, it's just how he deals with his enemies.
And that's fine. It could have been expanded so much better.
Yeah.
A lot of people are really going in on Joaquin Phoenix on this.
Having seen Joaquin Phoenix in Gladiator versus Napoleon, he was not in it, if that makes sense. Like it's not the normal Joaquin, because normally he saves projects. He's a really good actor. He usually comes in.
Phenomenal actor.
I don't know what it was, man, but it's not bad, but it's not good.
It is the most, I don't want to say bland. That's not the word I'm looking for. He gave the most serviceable.
He gave the most generic, like, stereotypical Napoleon in his own way. I mean, the depth of his crazy was cool. Like, it's so weird, because it's like, I don't want to say he didn't do a good job, because he put a lot of oomph into what he did, but it's the same oomph and the same thing the whole movie.
I saw,
And it's weirdly funny, and it like you laugh
There
at
were
things
some
that
funny
aren't funny
parts.
though. You know, you're like, wait a second, that shouldn't have been funny. That's sexual assault.
because you have boats.
Yeah,
that
and that was God. Man.
There's this could be just rumors, but I saw I think it was a Screen Rant article that just weeks before they started shooting, Joaquin Phoenix told Ridley Scott he had no idea what to do to be Napoleon.
Yeah. And the movie doesn't help him because
it's a daunting task. Yeah, there's nothing in the script.
No,
I really feel like
can't.
if with a better script and a better starting point for the rest of it to develop, maybe it could have been better. I don't know. Anyways, we're recording this first week of December. As of December 3rd, the movie has grossed 136 million worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, on a $200 million budget. There was a 65% drop from week 1 to week 2.
Which means the people are seeing it, not liking it, and telling people, hey,
don't
go
not
see
to
it
watch
in the theater. It's just weird. And, you know, a little historian goes a long way. So if you didn't want to make an accurate Napoleon movie, whatever, that's fine. But you have one of the greatest actors of this last 2-decade period. The man can act. I mean, he's Joker. He's Commodus. The guy has chutzpah. He can act. Hire a historian, if only to help him, to be like, this is who Napoleon was.
Something was.
This is what his letters are.
Yeah.
I just feel mildly bad for everybody involved because it's one of those, it could have been so freaking good.
Yeah.
And instead it's fine.
So I'm pretty sure you went first last time. So
yeah.
I might be wrong. I don't know.
It doesn't matter. Rate it, baby.
I am going to, before I rate this, I'm going to retroactively change my rating for Gladiator.
Okay.
Because time and time again now, I have compared a movie to Gladiator, and though when I watched it, I did have gripes about it, and I didn't think it was a perfect movie by any means, but I can't hold it as the standard for a bunch of different other movies
a 7.
and then say it's a 7.
Right.
I realized that looking back, I'm like, hold on a second. Okay, I need to go back and change this. So I'm going to retroactively make Gladiator an 8 out of 10.
There you go. I mean, I rated it an 8. Yeah.
I almost said 7.5, and I was like, no.
It's an 8.
Being optimistic, life's short, enjoy things.
It's an 8. Gladiator is one of those movies that you have to think to yourself, how many movies have I seen that are actually better than Gladiator? Yeah. And not many, so give it an 8.
And it also came out in 2000, which is like one of the
different
worst
culture.
eras of film.
Well, it's a different movie culture.
The standard
was
was
felt
low.
like a 2000 movie. That's what it is. This felt like that, like weirdly trying to be accurate, but it isn't at all. Grimy, like overly grody character 2000s movie.
Was this like a realistic Troy?
It kind of felt that way. Now that you say that, like it's lesser than the sum of its parts, you know?
All right, so my rating, with that said, my rating is going to be 5.5.
Yeah, I'm going to give it the movie a 6.
Okay.
In terms of, I'd watch it again, but only if somebody asked me, kind of like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You know, I didn't hate it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to see it again.
All right, you don't have to compare these two movies.
I have to, because they feel the same to me.
They're
wildly different. That's not
Kyle,
true at all. That's just
we'll argue after this podcast.
Objectively, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's a far better movie than Napoleon. It just is. Based off of critics. I didn't think so. But
whatever.
Screw me. Am I right? Who cares about the historian's opinion in matters of Hollywood? Historically, I'm going to lowball this because I'm going to give it a 5.
Okay.
Which, other than Braveheart, I think is the lowest rating I've given.
Maybe.
The reason I give it a 5 is not because it's historically inaccurate for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Most of it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's that every time historical accuracy was like super important or detail was important, it didn't do it. So that's why it gets a 5.
Yeah.
Because you leave the movie not thinking you have a good understanding about Napoleon, and you don't. As much as I'd like to spend the next hour ranting against Ridley Scott and the like cluster that is this movie, I have a sneaking suspicion that this podcast is way too long.
Way too long.
So we're going to wrap it up. Those were our ratings. Next week, well, we don't know when this is going to be released. So next week is either We Were Soldiers,
right,
or more likely, based off of when we're recording this, it is, and Dustin's schedule, because he's the editor. More likely next week is the first part of our Tombstone double feature.
Tombstone double feature.
So stay tuned.
My favorite Western.
Stay tuned.
of all 90s.
Yeah, of all
I'm
90s.
kidding. No, I'm all on time.
I love
90s.
Tombstone.
It was 90s, right?
It was 90s.
Okay.
Early 90s.
Somewhere
So
around
yeah,
there.
next week's either We Were Soldiers or the first part of our Tombstone double feature. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully Dustin gets this slimmed down to where you're not
I'm
going
gonna
to
do some
hate
cuts,
yourself.
man. I'm gonna do some cuts. Thank you all for tuning in. If you've seen Napoleon, we hope we
Did it justice.
added to your enjoyment, because we didn't get a whole lot out of it, but it wasn't a waste of time.
Yeah,
That's my review.
That's it. It wasn't a waste of time. Yes. It's the best thing we can say about this movie. Good night and God bless everybody.
All right, see ya.